Happy New Year's, guys. Thanks for sticking with me. Sorry it's taken me so long to get back up and running, but I think you'll be pleased if you have been with me. We have improved audio and video for all of our videos coming from this point on. And so we are starting the new year with kind of, I think, a bang, a real gem, a movie that I first saw when I was about 12, 13. Heavy Metal, 1981. If ever there was a midnight movie, it is this adult sci-fi anthology animated with a really rockin' soundtrack. And so without further ado, on with the show. Happy New Year. I randomly found it on, of course, TUBI. You guys know TUBI. It's almost all I watch. I love TUBI, Criterion Channel, Shudder. But Heavy Metal was a film that I saw. I think I was 12 years old when I saw it. And it blew my mind because for those of you that aren't familiar, Heavy Metal is an I repeat, adult animated sci-fi fantasy anthology film. Basically, it's about 6 or 7 sort of vignette stories. Pardon me, I'm getting through a cold here, guys. That are all sort of tied together by this phenomenon, this green orb of evil called the Loch-Nar that appears in different dimensions, different worlds, different universes, tormenting, tempting, and terrorizing different people. And all of these stories are different forms of, I guess, kind of morality tales. If you're familiar with the old Twilight Zone series or the current Black Mirror series, you kind of get an idea of maybe what these stories are about. But they all have this being of the Loch-Nar, this glowing green orb of ultimate evil, it's called in the movie, that's always, like I said, attempting, tormenting, or terrorizing people. And each different story has someone succeeding against it, failing against it, succumbing to it. What's really cool about this movie is, again, it's very adult themed. I had never seen animated nudity or animated characters cursing until I saw this movie as a 12-year-old kid. And I was like, what is this? And I just couldn't look away. Within the first, and I'm not giving too much away, the first sequence is you have an astronaut returning to Earth, and he's not returning to Earth in a shuttle. He's actually dropping out of a shuttle into orbit in like a 65 Corvette to the tune of Sammy Hagar's Heavy Metal playing. So it's a pretty rockin' soundtrack all the way through. You have Sammy Hagar, Blue Oyster Cult, Black Sabbath, Riggs, Journey, just a great snapshot of rock from that era. And that's kind of what opens up the movie. This astronaut comes to Earth, lands his Corvette, and greets his daughter, opens up his case of, to surprise her with what he found on his travels. And what do you know? It's the Loch-Nar. The Loch-Nar immediately vaporizes him and gets in the face of the young girl, telling her that he's going to tell her all about his travails, what he's about, and then he's going to take her out too. So we're then dropped into all of these various stories, going back and forth to the Loch-Nar and the young girl as he tells these stories, and then, we go back and forth. These stories are wild. You have one story called Harry Canyon, which is animated in the style of the French illustrator Möebius, who, if you read the Heavy Metal magazine, which is where all of this stuff comes from, Heavy Metal was published, I think started being published in the late 70s, might still be published today, maybe in just digital form, but I remember seeing it at comic book stores when I was a kid, and it being, just really beautifully painted and illustrated, it always having a more adult theme to it. There was nudity, but sort of everything from high concept science fiction to stories like Harry Canyon in the film, where it's sort of a neo-noir. It's the year 2031. There's a guy who's just kind of a taxi cab driver in a futuristic New York City who gets tied up with a young woman whose father is an archaeologist who finds, what do you know, the Loch-Nar. And so he gets tied into a whole bunch of, mischief and shenanigans. And that's kind of a trope that sort of reproduces itself across all of the stories. All the stories are different. There's another story called Den, which also, I believe, comes from the pages of the heavy metal magazine, of like a 13-year-old boy who encounters the Lochnar that fell to Earth in a meteorite. He gets transported to kind of like a medieval fantasy world of sorcerers and swordsmen. He arrives on this planet and suddenly he transforms from like a 13-year-old kid, 13-year-old skinny kid, to a massive muscle-bound, bald-headed sort of warrior. And he's beating up mutants and all manner of villains, and saving the gal and all that sort of stuff. Just fun stuff. There are several sequences in this movie. The last one, I think, is probably, they really, really rock out the ending in this movie, where we see the warrior woman that's on the poster for the film. She's called Tarna. And this animation in particular, I think a couple other of the sequences in the film were rotoscoped. And I don't think they do rotoscoping anymore. Rotoscoping, it was a process by which they would film like live action. Like they'd film a woman doing the actions of Tarna, the warrior woman. And then they would animate on top of the action. And so the animation has this super smooth sort of feel to it, akin to like if you've ever seen the movie Akira. If you're familiar with really benchmark, very well done Japanese animation. And again, this was 1981. This isn't anything of the level of what we saw in Akira in '88, but it gets close. There's the opening story, the ending story, and some of the vignettes in the middle have that sort of very smooth rotoscoped feel, and it's really fun to watch. Some sequences are heavy in dialogue, some aren't. They really do lean on that late 70s, early 80s sci-fi fantasy art style that you really don't see anymore. This film, it's such a time capsule. It's such a gem because you don't see these types of stories anymore. You don't really see these types of characterizations. You don't see these types of character designs anymore, and you sure as hell don't hear hard rock to metal music in films anymore. So it's a really, if you're looking for something, and most people that I talk to about film these days seem to really want something new, something fresh, something different than all of the stuff that we're being fed. We can all kind of feel when it comes to a lot of this entertainment that it's okay. Yeah, you've just been vacuuming up our data, and you've seen what I watch, and you're trying to give me the same thing. It's not really working though. A lot of these things that we're getting in the theater isn't necessarily what we want. And I think you then have an obligation to watch really good stuff, whether it's new or old. And if you're watching this channel, I like old shit. And I try to bring you what I think is the best, or at least the most interesting, of great film. Heavy metal really fits the bill. You can't predict it. How often do you get an animated show with a neo-noir future New York City cab driver? You get a World War II story with zombie pilots. You get a warrior woman taking out evil mutants for the fate of not just the world, but the universe. It's just really fun. And again, so different. You can tell by watching a movie like Heavy Metal that this clearly was not, they didn't do any sort of marketing to audiences and then go back, oh, they didn't like this, and we fixed that and we changed this. This movie just is what it is. And it takes some of its more popular storylines from the Heavy Metal magazine and beautifully animates them into just really fun little vignette stories. Another side note on this film is it's a Canadian production, even though Heavy Metal was an American magazine. And what's cool about that is you have, and it's really anachronistic. You have, if you're a fan of comedy at all, and you're familiar with the comedy greats of Second City, of SCTV, which is Second City up in Toronto. You've got Second City Chicago, but you also have Second City Toronto. You have guys like John Candy, Joe Flaherty, Eugene Levy doing voices in this film. And I remember watching it as a kid because at the time I saw this movie at like age 12 or 13, I was also watching reruns of SCTV on Nick at Night, which was Nickelodeon. And so I'm like, of course, grew up with John Candy movies, Eugene Levy, all those guys. So too, Harold Ramis is a voice in it as well, who wrote Ghostbusters and just a legend. So it was really cool. I was like, I know this guy, and it's like that sounds like John Candy. Then watching the credits, like, oh, that was John Candy. That was Joe Flaherty. So if you are in any way a comedy nerd, a comedy historian, you might recognize some of those voices. They're not any of the leads, I don't think, but they do pop up. And again, this is not a movie for kids. There is everything from drug use to sex to violence. This is intended for mature audiences. And of course, almost every guy that I knew who saw this movie saw it when he was like 12, 13, 14. Definitely, underage technically. But that's how we rolled in the 80s and 90s. You didn't ask for permission, you just watched stuff. And I think we were better for it, getting exposed to these things. And I've been listening to the heavy metal soundtrack at the gym since I watched this movie, because there's a lot of really good rock, which we don't really make rock music anymore either. Everything is either pop, hip hop, or country these days. Rock, really solid R&B. There's these genres of music that don't really exist anymore. So it's kind of cool to watch a movie that just leans into one genre of music. And again, heavy metal in terms of its content, in terms of its stories in the magazine, hard rock really does lend itself to supporting and just making the stories that much more vibrant. It's a great soundtrack. But yeah, I can't recommend heavy metal enough. It is currently, at least as of this recording, on TUBI, like almost everything else I'm probably going to review in the next few months. And check it out if you want something new, something different, something you can't predict, something original, and you're just tired of being fed literally the same stuff over and over and over from every platform and from Hollywood. I can't recommend it. It's just a fun night. Get some food, invite friends over, and cue this sucker up, and check out the soundtrack. It's just a rockin' soundtrack. You can't help but be energized at the gym with the heavy metal soundtrack. So yeah, let me know what you guys thought of it. Am I out of line here? I think it's really held up. I think it's a really cool piece of its time, but also in a way sort of timeless, because it has such guts, and it just is boldly what it is. But you let me know what you guys think. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.